So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our seminar on mental health awareness in seniors. I'm just going to share my slides. In case you weren't here last week, my name is Isabel, and I am going to be giving this presentation this evening. So 1 second while I share my slides. Hope everyone can see my slides. So today is part 2 of our senior and mental health awareness presentations. And today we're going to look at how to promote mental wellness in seniors. But before we get into that, I'd just like to remind us that this is a presentation by the GIM Legal Learning Centre, who are running and who will be running a series, or who already started running a series of presentations to support and empower seniors. There's going to be financial empowerment for seniors, financial fraud and scam awareness for seniors. We've already had a presentation on digital literacy for seniors, and for the next. This is our second one. So last week I started off by introducing mental health awareness in seniors, and today we're going to continue. And the presentations on senior mental health awareness will come to an end next Tuesday, which is the 9th of September. So this program is also funded by the government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors program. Mustn't forget to mention that because they are our sponsors. So welcome again if you're just joining. So before we get into today's main presentation, I'd like us to have a quick recap from part 1. So if you were here last week, we talked about the prevalence of mental health issues in seniors, the fact that seniors now live longer, and thus they're increasingly active in the workforce as well as in family life. And that's all well and good, but something important is that aging brings both contributions and challenges, especially in healthcare and economic systems. So what does this mean really? So because seniors are living longer and, some of them have to work for longer, they undergo or they experience a lot of challenges which can actually trigger mental health issues in them. So it could be mental health concerns such as depression, anxieties, dementia, loneliness, and also substance use. And if you remember from last week, if you were here last week, there's an overlap between these conditions, which tend to be prevalent in seniors, and they actually need targeted support. And one of the questions that we are trying to address in these presentations is how we can promote mental health in seniors, how communities, policies, and services can better support aging populations, and what role can intergenerational collaboration play in fostering resilience and well-being in the elderly population. So there are risks and there are protective factors that influence mental health in seniors and in people generally, but we're talking about seniors in this presentation. So there are risks such as isolation, grief, chronic illness. And if you recall, if you were here last week, we talked about loneliness, depression, dementia, substance use. All these are things that emanate as a result of isolation and grief and chronic illness. And there are protective factors that can actually circumvent these conditions, such as social connections, having a purpose, engaging in physical activity. So let's start off by looking at some statistics, and this is from Canada. So these stats are from Statistics Canada. So the overall loneliness in seniors age 65 and above is about 19%. There are gender differences. Women tend to feel more isolated than men. That could be because of a number of factors. Primarily, in most relationships, if most men are known to die before women, and women tend to be susceptible to developing, feeling isolated, especially when they go through menopause and the conditions that come as a result of menopause. Also, isolation can be impacted by your marital status. So widowed people, 31% of widowed people tend to feel isolated compared to people who are in relationships, whether either they are married or in their common law relationship, which is about 13%. Also, income disparities promote isolation as well as loneliness in seniors. So people who earn lower tend to feel more isolated than people who earn higher incomes. Also, where you live can actually make you more susceptible to loneliness. And unsurprisingly, people who live in small towns um, do not experience isolation as much as people who live in urban locations. Small towns, everybody knows everybody. People look out for each other. In cities and in bigger towns, there's more isolation because everybody's minding their business. People tend to live in you know in larger houses that are probably far away, from other houses, or people tend to be more educated and busier, and they do not look out for other people. Also, age differences. So the older you get, the more isolated you would feel, or you could feel, maybe through the death of a spouse, death of your friends, because of mobility issues, unlike people who are within that 65 to 74 age bracket, that the frequency of isolation is actually much lower. Also, social participation barriers. 38% of those with barriers report loneliness. People who have mobility issues, people who are not well, who have a chronic condition, they're unable to socialize. They tend to be lonelier compared to people who are not. So what can we do to prevent isolation? What can seniors do? I can't overemphasize how important it is to stay socially connected. And we're going to talk more about this in subsequent slides. So seniors are encouraged to join clubs. There are lots of clubs for over 50s. There are clubs in the gym for their Keep Fit clubs. There are clubs for people with similar interests, whether it's playing pickleball, whether it's going on a walk. There are lots of clubs that older people can join. So I'd like to encourage anybody who hasn't joined a club to find a job, with people of similar interests, or develop an interest and find a job in a club that deals with such an interest. Attend community events. We're getting to the end of summer, but in the summer months, there tend to be lots of community events. Seniors are actually encouraged to attend those, to meet other seniors, to see what's happening in the community, and also to volunteer. That's a very good way of staying active, meeting new people. Also using technology, but of course use technology wisely. We had the presentation on digital awareness where we heard about all the ways people can be conned, people can be scammed through using digital devices. So technology does have its advantages, but the warning should be that we should use it wisely and we should use them securely. So using video calls, social media, messaging can bridge distances between us and our loved ones, between seniors and their friends. But at the same time, make sure you have all your protective software on your device, and be wary of, scam calls and all the ways that scammers try to target elderly people. Creating a routine interactions is also very important. You can organize and schedule regular meetups or calls with family and friends. And if you develop a habit of, say, calling your daughter or calling your friend or your sibling on so and so time or day of the week, if they don't hear from you, that's even a way that they can tell that something is wrong, and they can check in on you or ask somebody who is local to you to check in on you. Accessible transportation is also another way of preventing isolation. So, register for accessible transportation. I know most cities have accessible buses and even taxis for elderly people. So you might not have a car, but if you register for such a service, it can actually take you to these locations. And also supporting living environments. When people get to a certain age, they might not have mobility issues, but they might begin to get slower, they want company, and they go and live in a place where they can be supported, such as assisted living homes. It's not a sign that you're helpless. It's just a sign it's just something that you can do to build your social interaction and also protect yourself mentally. So by all means, look into a housing, look into a center, or even if it's a day place that you can go for a couple of hours a day, that actually encourages interaction. So another risk factor for developing mental issues is grief. And grief, which could be referred to as complicated grief, is a significant risk factor for depression and other mental health issues in seniors who may also experience other losses and have limited support. So as we get older, we can develop chronic issues, we can develop other issues, like we some people can retire, some people have to move to a smaller place, they have to downsize, and all those things can impact our mental health. People can find themselves grieving because they have lost what they do routinely. They've moved to another town in order to downsize. So by all means, we need to recognize that grief, and it's not just from losing a loved one, even from losing your normality, can actually affect your mental health. So how do we navigate that? One of the things we can do if we lose a loved one, or we retire, or have to downsize, or undergo big changes, is actually allow space for mourning and emotional expression. Don't try and sweep it under the carpet. Don't try and compress it. Don't try and subdue it. Actually allow that space to think and appreciate the fact that this is what has happened, and how are you going to move forward. And if possible, seek support, talk to a counselor, join a grief support group, lean on trusted friends, talk to somebody about it. Don't internalize the way you feel. And another important thing is to maintain your routine, because sometimes when we experience grief, we just throw everything out of the window. Actually, structure helps restore a sense of normalcy. Engaging in meaningful activities helps one navigate grief as well. Immersing yourself in a hobby. A lot of people have said to me that gardening is a very, very very therapeutic hobby that one can engage in to take their minds off grief. Volunteering, actually supporting others that are actually going through something that you have experienced in the past, is actually quite therapeutic. And also spiritual practices can provide comfort. A lot of people go to church, they go to grief support groups, they go on pilgrimage if they can afford it. All these things can provide comfort. Then by all means, monitor your mental health. think about, check for those signs, watch for those signs of depression or prolonged distress. Chronic diseases is another risk factor for developing mental health. And on this screen, I'd like to take you through some of these statistics in Canada. 73% of individuals aged 65 and over have at least one of 10 common chronic diseases, such as cardiovascular disease, arthritis, hypertension, high blood pressure, periodontal disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, cancer, asthma, and even anxiety disorders. So let's not ignore that. There's a link. A link has been shown to be between having a chronic disease and developing mental illness. And why do these happen? Why is chronic disease such a risk factor? If there's any person here who probably is yet to fall under that senior category, by all means, and if you're a senior already, by all means, begin to examine your behavioral factors, because 9.5% of people, who report daily or occasional tobacco use find themselves developing cardiovascular disease or even COPD, which stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a disease of the respiratory system. And then 77.3% of people who fail to consume fruits and vegetables, less than 5 times a day develop chronic disease. People who do not do physical exercise, they develop cardiovascular disease, ischemic heart disease, diabetes. We need to watch ourselves. We need to change our lifestyles so that we do not fall victim to these diseases, which correlate with developing mental illness. Also, people who have reported exceeding low-risk drinking guidelines, people who drink, more than the recommended amount of alcohol daily, weekly, and there are differences between men and women, which is beyond the scope of this presentation. But by all means, check the amount of alcohol that you consume, because there is a correlation between that and developing a chronic disease. Also, your BMI, your body mass index, that is something that we need to be aware of. We need to work on. We need to go and get ourselves checked by the doctor to find out whether we're overweight, whether we might not be obese, but we might be overweight. And when we're overweight, especially in women, that is that there is a link between that and heart disease. You're actually susceptible to developing all kinds of heart diseases, all kinds of cardiovascular manifestations. So that is something that we need to be aware of. And also sleeping, not getting enough sleep, having trouble sleeping. A lot of people, as they get older, women, as they go into menopause, they find themselves having trouble sleeping. And that is also linked with the development of chronic diseases. So if by all means we're not getting enough sleep, we need to go see a medical expert. So how do we manage chronic diseases? Regular medical checkups, as I just said, because early detection and consistent monitoring are very, very important, especially with diseases such as diabetes, cancer. Early detection, every disease actually, early detection and consistent monitoring are very, very important. And also, you have to be compliant when it comes to taking your medications. Use reminders, use pill organizers to stay on track. As I mentioned from the previous slide, maintaining a healthy lifestyle is very, very important. Eat a balanced diet, engage in physical activities, go on walks, walk your dog if you have one, swimming, aqua aerobics, and having adequate sleep is actually very, very important to avoid and manage chronic illness. Also, education and self-advocacy, actually encouraging oneself, understanding, taking the steps to understand your condition. If you happen to be a sufferer of a chronic illness, such as arthritis, by all means, join a group, join a group of other sufferers to understand the condition, how to cope, how to change your diet, and find ways of communicating your needs clearly to your medical practitioner. If you need support, if you need to be referred to, say, a consultant, an expert who can actually help you improve your standard of living, by all means, do not shy away from doing that. Integrated care, so coordinate with health care providers for holistic support, because a lot of healthcare providers actually just focus on the illness, but actually it's very important to focus on yourself holistically, so that you don't get bogged down by your situation. Find ways of actually protecting your mental health, irrespective of the fact that you're suffering from diabetes, or you have a heart condition, or you suffer from high blood pressure. By all means, find a way of, taking your mind off it, so that you do not fall victim to these conditions of loneliness, depression, and even other more serious mental issues such as dementia. As I mentioned, there is a link between chronic diseases and poor mental health. So people who have chronic diseases are more likely to have a mental illness at some point. Because think about it, you've got mobility issues. You're going in and out of the hospital, out of the doctor's office every single day. You're suffering from chronic pain. That's bound to affect you mentally. So by all means, start taking the steps to improve your lifestyle choices. By all means, seek information. Go check your blood pressure. Go and request for blood work. Check your glucose levels. And if you have say, family members who have suffered from a certain condition, by all means, ask your doctor if you could go and get tested. There are tests out there now for actually breast cancer. There are tests for prostate cancer. There are different tests that men and women can do, to check whether they're susceptible to a chronic illness, because, that would prepare you for it in the first place. And you'll be able to prepare your mind and actually develop a plan where you will be able, to look after yourself, not just that condition, but also your mental well-being. So what about the protective factors for mental well-being in seniors? Good nutrition, as I mentioned, getting adequate sleep. I think for seniors, it's between 7 to 8 hours sleep is actually recommended. And engage in a hobby. You might be a retired person, or you may not be retired. Find a hobby, find something that interests you, learn a new skill, learn a new language, volunteer, practice mindfulness, take time to just be still and just allow, yourself to rest mentally and physically. You can play music, listen to music if that's your thing. And also faith and spirituality actually contribute a lot to mental wellness. Having a faith, going to church, praying, reading the Bible, appreciating nature, spending time with your family, realizing that, this world is not all there is to it. All these things are ways in which we protect our mental space. Having a daily wellness routine is very, very important. So I'd like to encourage seniors to build routines that include physical activity, and it could be a range of things. It could be daily stretches, daily walks. It could be going to the gym, aerobics, swimming. It could be running if you're still fit enough to do that. And not just physical activity, social interaction, meeting up with friends, volunteering at a local school, volunteering with other generations, Having friends who belong to another generation as well, it actually keeps you young. Don't feel that, oh, they're going to say that I'm out of touch and stuff like that. You actually have a lot to teach them, and you have a lot to learn from them, particularly technology. And also relaxation techniques are also very important in developing mental and physical wellness. Having social connections is actually very important. And why is that? Because it reduces loneliness, which is a risk factor for mental illness. It boosts emotional resilience and it improves cognitive health. So again, and I can't emphasize this enough, join a community group or join a club. There are lots of clubs out there. If you go to the library, if you go to the medical center, if you check on the notice board, there are lots of clubs. There's chess, there's pickleball, there's bowling. There are people that go out on a weekly basis just to keep each other company. And also, if you have family and friends, try and maintain regular contact with them. You know, arrange a day of the week where you talk to your friends and family, and also use technology to stay connected. You probably say, well, I don't live in the same town as my siblings. I don't live in the same town as my friends. I've moved to another city. Use technology. At least we have lots of means of keeping in touch with people these days. We have social media, we have WhatsApp, we have FaceTime. I think Skype is still there as well. You know, we can use all these means to stay connected with our family and our friends. And as I mentioned from the last slide, participate in intergenerational activities. There are lots of schools, hospitals, clubs, even for children, play groups, kindergartens that are actually looking for older people to volunteer, to give back, to teach younger people, even in high schools as well. You know, there are days where they invite older people to come and share their life experiences. So, you know, find or go to your local paper, go to the website of your local council, the city, and look for such opportunities because indeed they are out there. Social connections, they actually enhance life satisfaction, motivation, and mental clarity. So it's really, really important to maintain social connections. I think this is like a repeat of what I just said, but I'm going to say it again. You can volunteer and mentor others. The fact that you're a senior means that you have a wealth of experience to pass on to other generations. Set personal goals and engage in meaningful hobbies. You know, there is painting, there is pottery, there is writing, reading, starting a book club, joining a book club, participating in faith-based and cultural activities, sharing wisdom and experience with younger generations. I think this weekend there's going to be the Brant the cultural event here in Brant. You know, by all means, that's a way of you know, getting to see what's in the local community, getting to find out what's in the local community and how you can be a part of it. Physical activity cannot be overemphasized. It supports brain health, it reduces stress, and it improves sleep and our mood. Regular walking, swimming, yoga, if that's your thing. And they're senior friendly fitness classes. You don't have to do anything that is high impact. Do something that is senior friendly. And I know at my local gym, there are actually classes targeted to older people, you know, which tend to be gentler. The instructors tend to be somebody who is older as well. I know there are walking clubs, there are swim clubs, and by all means, incorporate movement into your daily routine. I think that the government recommendation is 30 minutes, I think 150 minutes a week that I recommended for everybody, including seniors. And by all means, before you start a new program, consult with your healthcare provider to make sure that the plan or the fitness regimen that you're about to embark on is actually good enough or is safe enough for you to engage in. So yeah, so that was my last slide. And if you have any questions, by all means, this is your time to ask them. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, so my first question, someone's asking about the targeted exercises or the exercises that are recommended for older people, and they want to know whether water aerobics is a good one. Yes, one thing I always say to people is that everybody is the same in the water because you have that gravitational pull. So I actually recommend water aerobics, especially for people who suffer from arthritis. It's actually you actually burn calories and you don't feel it. You don't actually notice the fact that you're burning a lot of calories. I actually like to recommend um regular walking. That is something that I do, and I recommend that for people who are unable to run or who are unable to swim. You see a lot of people out there, elderly people walking with their Zimmer frames or walking with these two I don't know what they're called, but they're like walking sticks, and they use those as a means of support. So yeah, by all means, try those. But as I mentioned, do consult your healthcare provider to ensure that you are engaging in a plan that is good or that is safe and that can actually help your condition and not aggravate it. Um, any more questions? Any more questions? Intergenerational relationships. Yes, that's a very good question. So, yes, as I mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities, especially in schools and in youth groups for seniors to volunteer and community activities as well. I know for sure, especially in Brand, I've seen in the healthcare center an advertisement for seniors to volunteer. And I also know about programs where seniors are actually invited into schools to actually tell their life story. And it's actually even better if you have been a professional and you want to, tell students about, your experience, say as a nurse, as a writer, as a doctor. I know there are programs for that. And also, if you're lucky to be blessed with grandchildren, I'm sure you already know the value and the joy that you derive, from, sharing your life story and also learning their take on things, especially if you have grandchildren that are teenagers. Daily wellness routine. I always encourage people to actually create a routine, like from the time you get up from bed to the time you go to bed. Like try and feel like morning, afternoon, and evening, with something to do, even if it's a walk in the morning, um, me time or briefing exercises in the afternoon, then reading a book in the evening. I think it's very important that when you plan, you actually feel more purposeful, and that actually contributes to your mental well-being. In terms of food, someone's asking about what diets favor elderly people. I'm not a nutritionist, but from what I know a good diet. Um, I read somewhere that if you eat more food that are green, yellow, red, more colorful food compared to foods that are brown, like bread, rice, it's actually, better to focus on foods, vegetables. I know they say 5 a day, and that has been changing with the years, but I think a good diet of fruit and vegetables, nuts, proteins, your proteins, eggs, meat, lean meat, avoiding sugary foods and sugary drinks, you know, I think that is what is recommended for elderly, for anybody, and elderly people especially, because as we get older, our metabolism slows down, you know, we need food that, you know, we don't need empty calories, we need calories that actually make a difference. And I know that with people with arthritis, they actually require food that are less inflammatory. Any more questions? Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I will see you all next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to seek help and support others to promote our mental health awareness, our mental health well-being. So thank you all for joining, and see you next Tuesday, where it will be part 3 and the last part of this of these presentations on mental health awareness. Thank you.